The little girl never cried when the bakery owner apologized for having only one tiny cake left. She simply smiled, held the plain white cake with trembling hands, and whispered that it was the most beautiful birthday cake she had ever seen. The exhausted single father standing behind her quietly reached into his pocket, counted his last $3, and paid for it before she could put it back on the shelf. Neither of them knew that before sunset, that simple act of kindness would expose a mistake worth $10 million and change two broken lives forever. Graham Mercer had once believed that talent and hard work guaranteed a fair chance. Years earlier, he had been a respected structural engineer whose passion was creating affordable modular homes that could survive hurricanes, floods, and wildfires without costing ordinary families a fortune. After his wife passed away following a long illness, everything changed. Medical bills swallowed his savings, his business partners drifted away, and the investors who once admired his ideas suddenly considered him too risky. He became a single father raising his 8-year-old daughter, Nora, while struggling to keep alive the dream he had promised his late wife he would never abandon. For nearly 2 years Graham worked from an old rented garage converted into a workshop. Every blueprint was drawn by hand. Every prototype was built from recycled materials he found at demolition sites. Friends suggested he give up and take a stable office job, but he refused because he believed families deserved homes that could protect them during disasters without bankrupting them. Eventually his innovation attracted the attention of one of the country's largest construction corporations. The company invited him to present a proposal valued at nearly $10 million if approved. Graham spent 6 sleepless weeks preparing for that meeting. The presentation lasted only 23 minutes, the executives barely looked at his models. They glanced at his worn jacket, his inexpensive shoes, and the old laptop that froze twice during the demonstration. The young chief executive officer, Evelyn Brooks, thanked him politely before explaining that the company preferred proven developers with larger financial backing. His proposal was rejected without further discussion. Graham walked out carrying the same box of blueprints he had walked in with, feeling as though years of sacrifice had been dismissed before anyone truly understood his vision. He never blamed Evelyn personally. From his perspective, she had simply made a business decision. Life moved on because it had to. The next Saturday afternoon, Graham promised Nora they would visit the neighborhood market after finishing work in the garage. They had exactly $21 left until his next consulting payment arrived. Nora wanted to buy balloons for her classroom fundraiser, while Graham secretly hoped to stretch every dollar into groceries for the week. The bakery near the market was crowded with families collecting birthday cakes. The smell of fresh bread floated into the sunny street. Graham noticed a young woman standing quietly beside a little girl wearing a faded blue dress. The child admired the last remaining birthday cake in the display case, but after checking her purse, the woman gently shook her head. The bakery owner explained that it was already heavily discounted to only $3 because it had been ordered by someone who never returned to collect it. The little girl smiled bravely despite obvious disappointment. She said birthdays were still special without cake. Something about those words reminded Graham of Nora after her mother's funeral, when she had insisted she was fine simply because she did not want her father to feel guilty. Without hesitation, Graham placed 3 crumpled dollar bills on the counter and asked the owner to wrap the cake for the child instead. The woman looked embarrassed and tried to refuse, but Graham simply smiled and said birthdays happened only once each year, while kindness could last forever. The little girl hugged the small cake as though it were priceless. She thanked him with tears shining in her eyes. Only then did Graham notice how tired the woman looked despite her elegant clothes. There was something strangely familiar about her face, but he could not place it. She introduced herself simply as Evelyn and explained that the birthday belonged to her niece, whose parents had recently died in an accident. Since becoming her guardian, she had been learning that love could not be scheduled between business meetings. Graham politely wished them well before leaving with Nora. Halfway home, Nora squeezed his hand and said buying that cake had been the best thing they had done all week. Graham smiled, although he quietly wondered whether giving away those last $3 had been irresponsible. Monday morning arrived with another unexpected disappointment. Graham learned that the workshop landlord intended to sell the property within 30 days. Without a new contract or investor, he would lose the only place where years of research existed. Boxes filled with prototypes suddenly looked like memories waiting to disappear. Meanwhile, something refused to leave Evelyn's thoughts. She kept remembering the exhausted father who had spent his last few dollars on a stranger instead of himself. During an executive review meeting, she happened to notice Graham's rejected proposal sitting inside an archive box waiting for disposal. For the first time since rejecting it, she opened the file again. This time she read every page. The deeper she studied the engineering calculations, the more uncomfortable she became. Independent testing reports confirmed extraordinary durability. Manufacturing costs were dramatically lower than competitors. Environmental impact was significantly reduced. She realized something painful: the proposal had never actually been rejected because it lacked value. It had been rejected because the review committee assumed a struggling inventor could never deliver such an ambitious project. That assumption included her own. Evelyn ordered a complete technical reassessment without informing anyone why. 3 days later the company's senior engineering department returned with unanimous praise. Graham's design was described as one of the most innovative housing systems they had evaluated in over a decade. Evelyn sat alone in her office staring through the window for a long time. She remembered the little $3 cake. The man she had underestimated had expected nothing in return when helping a stranger. She had possessed every advantage in life yet failed to recognize extraordinary character standing directly before her. Instead of sending lawyers or assistants, Evelyn drove herself to Graham's workshop. Sunlight poured through cracked windows where Nora painted colorful flowers on discarded wooden panels while Graham carefully adjusted another prototype. The workshop was smaller than Evelyn remembered from company records. Every corner reflected years of persistence rather than comfort. When Graham saw her, surprise crossed his face, but there was no bitterness. Evelyn apologized sincerely. She admitted she had judged him too quickly. She confessed that the committee had overlooked his work because appearances influenced decisions more than facts. She accepted full responsibility as chief executive. Graham listened quietly. He admitted the rejection had nearly convinced him to abandon everything. Evelyn then revealed that after conducting a complete independent review, every technical expert had strongly recommended approving the project. She offered him something even greater than the original contract. Instead of simply purchasing his designs, the company wanted Graham to become Director of Community Innovation, allowing him to oversee construction while ensuring affordable housing remained accessible to families instead of becoming another luxury product. Graham looked around his humble workshop before looking at Nora. For a moment he thought about every sleepless night, every unpaid bill, every promise made beside his wife's hospital bed. He accepted, but only after asking for one condition. The first community built using the new technology would prioritize families recovering from natural disasters and single parents struggling to rebuild their lives. Evelyn agreed immediately. Construction began only weeks later. News outlets praised the revolutionary housing project, but few reporters knew its true beginning had started with $3 inside a neighborhood bakery. As months passed, Graham transformed from overlooked inventor into a respected industry leader. Yet success never changed his habits. He still visited local schools encouraging children to pursue ideas others considered impossible. He still repaired neighbors' broken fences without charging them. Most importantly, he never forgot the difficult seasons that had taught him compassion. Evelyn changed as well. She redesigned her company's evaluation process so that proposals were reviewed anonymously during initial stages, ensuring ideas were judged before appearances. Young entrepreneurs from ordinary backgrounds suddenly received opportunities previously reserved for wealthy firms with polished presentations. Employees noticed another difference. The company's culture slowly shifted from chasing profits alone toward creating genuine impact in communities. One bright afternoon nearly a year later, Graham and Nora attended the opening ceremony of the first completed neighborhood built from his designs. Families received keys to safe, affordable homes while children laughed across newly planted parks. Among the guests stood the little girl whose birthday cake Graham had purchased. She ran across the grass carrying a handmade thank you card she had saved all year. Inside was a drawing of a tiny white cake beneath a bright yellow sun. Above it she had written that kindness was the strongest foundation any home could ever have. Graham could not hold back his tears, neither could Evelyn. They both understood that the greatest investments were rarely measured in dollars. $10 million had changed Graham's future. $3 had changed Evelyn's heart, and somewhere between those two numbers lived a lesson powerful enough to outlast every business contract ever signed. Before you leave, think about this story and ask yourself one simple question. Have you ever experienced a small act of kindness that completely changed your life, or have you been the person whose small gesture became someone else's turning point? Share your answer in the comments, because your story may give hope to someone who desperately needs it today. As the afternoon sun bathed the new neighborhood in warm golden light, Graham watched families unlocking doors that represented safety, dignity, and fresh beginnings. Nora slipped her hand into his and smiled the same quiet smile her mother used to wear. In that peaceful moment, Graham realized success had never been about proving anyone wrong. It had always been about proving that compassion, perseverance, and integrity could survive every setback. The project that had once been dismissed became a symbol of second chances, while a forgotten $3 birthday cake became the reminder that the smallest acts of generosity often create the biggest miracles. Hope had found its way back into their lives, not through wealth alone, but through hearts willing to see the value in people before judging the value of their circumstances. And that was the greatest victory of all.